Okay, let's dive into a really baffling case, the disappearance of Marsha Brantley. Back in the summer of 2009, a woman just vanishes. No struggle, no note, nothing. She was just gone. We're going to unpack this whole thing because it's a mystery that is still deeply unsettling.
So, what happens when someone just up and vanishes? Completely leaves their entire life behind. It's a question that's at the heart of every single one of these cases, right? But with Marsha Brantley, it's especially chilling. Why? Because everything she owned, everything she cared about, was just left there, untouched.
And when I say everything, I mean everything. This was not someone who decided to start over. Just think about it for a second. Her car, still in the driveway. Her cell phone, her valuables, all at home. Even her dogs, who she absolutely adored, were left behind. You don't do that. You don't just walk away from your entire life like that.
All right, so to figure out what might have happened here, we've got to understand the person at the center of this story. Let's get to know Marsha Brantley.
So who was Marsha? Well, she was so much more than just a name on a missing person poster. She was a former director at Lee University, a passionate writer who loved the outdoors, and, like we mentioned, she was crazy about her dogs. Originally from Illinois, she'd moved down to Cleveland, Tennessee to build a life for herself.
And in 2000, she married a guy named Donnie Brantley. Now, as investigators started digging, they quickly realized that this relationship, well, it was going to be key. It held a lot of the clues and, frankly, a lot of the contradictions that define this whole mystery.
For years, everything seemed pretty normal from the outside. But in those last few months before she went missing, friends and neighbors started noticing that something was wrong. You could say the cracks were really starting to show.
And if you look at the timeline, it's pretty alarming. It starts kind of small, Late 2008, friends get a feeling that her marriage is in trouble. Then, by March of 2009, Marsha herself tells them she's struggling with severe depression. And then, silence. After June, her cell phone activity just stops. By the end of the summer, everyone who knew her was asking the same terrifying question. Where is Marsha?
Listen to this. Just a few months before she vanished, she told a friend, "I'm so depressed, I can't get off the couch." That's haunting, isn't it? It's a huge cry for help from someone who is obviously in a really, really dark place.
Okay, so with her friends and neighbors officially sounding the alarm, the authorities had no choice but to get involved. But the story they got, well, it just didn't add up with what they were finding.
And this is where things get really conflicting. On one hand, you have her husband, Donnie. His story was simple. She voluntarily left me and we are getting a divorce. But what investigators found told a totally different story. Her car, phone, clothes, all her valuables, they were all still at the house. You just don't do that if you're leaving to start a new life. It makes no sense.
So the official investigation starts, but it moves slowly. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation opened a case in 2009. It took another 2 years before the local sheriff's office got on board. And then by November 2012, things took a really dark turn. They brought cadaver dogs to the Brantley home. That's a huge shift, right? It signals they're not just looking for a missing person anymore, they're investigating a potential murder.
Yeah, that search with the dogs in 2012, that was the start of a long, drawn-out legal battle. And you can probably guess who the police had their eye on from day one. Her husband, Donnie Brantley.
And what happened next is just a legal roller coaster. Get this. Donnie Brantley was indicted for his wife's murder, not once, but twice. First in 2013, then again in 2016. And unbelievably, both times, the charges were dismissed. You have to be asking, how does that even happen? What was going wrong for the prosecution?
Well, it really all boils down to this one major problem. On one side, you've got law enforcement who are absolutely convinced Donnie Brantley did it. But on the other side, a massive lack of evidence. I'm talking no body, no murder weapon, no direct proof a crime even happened. And at the end of the day, no matter how suspicious someone seems, suspicion just isn't enough to get a conviction.
So if the police were so sure, what did they think the motive was? Well, according to an investigation by the show 48 Hours, it pointed to something pretty classic: money. The idea that there were financial incentives for Marsha to be gone, that just added another layer of suspicion, suggesting this was no voluntary disappearance.
So, where does all this leave us today? After all the investigations, all the arrests, all the legal battles, what's the status of Marsha Brantley's case?
It's been more than 15 years. Just let that sink in.
For over a decade and a half, the people who loved her have been stuck in this awful limbo, just waiting for answers. Answers that might never actually come.
And that's the bottom line. Despite everything we've talked about, the suspicion, the arrests, Marsha's case is still open. Officially, she's still just a missing person. And while a cloud of suspicion might hang over her husband, legally, nothing has ever been proven.
So this whole story leaves us with a really tough question, one that comes up in so many cases like this. When you don't have a body, you don't have a weapon, and you don't have a confession, can you ever really get justice? What does that even look like? For Marsha Brantley, that question is still out there completely and hauntingly unanswered.